Welcome to episode 4 of the Ghost Furnace podcast. Today you will hear the story behind an interesting EVP that was captured in a Gettysburg motel, as well as the tale of a camping experience that abruptly ended at the sound of horse hooves and wagon wheels. If you have a paranormal experience of your own that you would like to share, please email it to us at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, please rate, subscribe, and review on whichever platform you use. Also, like and share us on Instagram and Facebook. The hosts of The Ghost Furnace are Nick, Pennsylvania, Bond, sometimes referred to as Brendan, and Mike. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, so I'm here today with my good friend Edgar, who has a really cool Gettysburg EVP story. This is a story that I've heard before, so I'm a little familiar with it. However, me and Edgar have only talked about it briefly. So when it comes to the actual EVP itself, we both have heard it and both have our opinions on it, but have not shared with each other yet what we think it says. So this should be a really fun conversation, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me tonight, Edgar.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Excited.
Yeah, super excited. So why don't you go ahead and tell everyone where you were, what you guys were up to, and what happened?
Okay. So, my wife, Sarah, and I, we went to Gettysburg. I believe this was our first year going out there. We just wanted to check it out, stay kind of in a haunted location, go check out some of the areas. We stayed at the Quality Inn at General Lee's headquarters. So it wasn't like one of the rooms you could rent that's done up to be scary and haunted. They don't have it decorated.
Period appropriate or whatever they call it.
Yeah, it was just a Quality Inn. But, we read some reviews about it, looking into it, that some people experienced some things. So we're like, all right, let's check it out. We got there. The person behind the counter, we asked them about it. They, let us know. Yeah, there's some crazy things that happen here. So, we set up shop in the room. We did a couple EVP sessions, stuff like that. Essentially how this played out, though, we were sitting there on the bed, and the TV kept making like a pop or, that noise like when it starts up or shuts off.
Mm-hmm.
It would do that every once in a while, like maybe every 10, 15 minutes or so. Kind of like, what's going on? So we decided to start up another EVP session. I was just using my iPad, which was the original sound recording, app on it, a little microphone. As we were sitting there, the TV kept kind of doing this, and then all of a sudden, so right next to me, to my right, I had a nightstand with the iPad and mic. There was also an alarm clock, and my phone was sitting there. And all of a sudden, the alarm clock made like a really strange buzzing sound. It kind of startled us. We were like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What is happening right now? And we couldn't figure it out. It made it for probably a couple seconds or so, I would say, and then it stopped. So I moved my phone off of it because I thought maybe that's what was causing it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, it was real strange. We kind of grounded ourselves and then finished up the EVP session. And we didn't hear anything at that time. After we went back and kind of reviewed the audio, we heard this EVP like clear as day. And we were both just wowed by it. Having watched different types of, ghost hunting shows, stuff like that, listened to different EVPs, like this was crazy to us. Yeah, that's essentially how it played out.
Nice. So, okay, so I have a few questions and just kind of thoughts before I play the EVP for everybody. Like, obviously, you guys are in Gettysburg. You guys are into ghosts already and everything. But yeah, so whenever you checked in, obviously, like, you don't think of a Quality Inn as being like a place that's haunted, especially like something that doesn't have tons of, like you said, period appropriate stuff in the room. What were some of the other stories that was there anything that the other you said the receptionist said about like she said like crazy things happen in general at the location, or your room specific?
In
I'm
general.
going to pop in. Hi, everyone. Sarah. She was just talking about apparitions and things, but she wasn't referring to the hotel that we were staying in. She was referring to the main building, which was also the museum. So it's like where we went to eat breakfast. Yes. Well, it wasn't the room that the things happened in. It was the main building. So we didn't even consider.
Yeah. Well, she did mention that in the lobby of the Quality Inn, she watched, I think, of like a black mass or something like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Pretty much just travel, across the corner of the room. And I mean, that was just one of the stories. She had a few. I can't remember them at this point.
But people don't think about modern places also being haunted. But you hear this time and time again of places that are built on locations that might have certain energies, how that still plays such a huge factor sometimes.
Yeah.
And also the fact that you guys were already kind of familiar with like ghost hunting tactics, like modern ghost hunting tactics, and actually doing EVP sessions and everything. Was there anything that led you to do this EVP session outside of curiosity, or was it just like, hey, we're here, we might as well try one? Or was there anything that you guys felt or happened beforehand?
It was, I mean, I feel like the whole TV popping noise kind of got us to start another EP session, but I think we did one before that.
I will say that I knew that hotel wasn't one of the main, attraction ghost hunting hotels, but I felt incredibly uncomfortable from the moment I walked in the door of that room until we left. I didn't feel that way in any of the other hotels that were supposedly haunted with lots of stories. I felt like something was watching me everywhere that I was. Like, it was a really unsettling feeling the entire time I was there.
Okay, so there was definitely a weird vibe going on even before.
Yeah, we slept in a room full of dolls the next night, and I was less comfortable in the first room than the doll room.
Yeah.
No, I think that says a lot right there. I think you're absolutely right.
I mean, for like a normal Quality Inn hotel.
Exactly. Now with the TV popping, do you remember if it was a flat screen TV or was it an old style cathode ray TV? Like the big.
It was like an older style flat screen TV, but like the kind of probably.
It's definitely dated.
Yeah, it was dated even for that time, probably. Okay. But it was like I remember one of the first sort of.
But it was a flat screen TV. It wasn't like the tube TVs. Okay.
No.
Because you do hear that a lot with like older style, like the kind of TVs we all had whenever we were younger, big Magnavoxes and Philips and everything. Because of how big the capacitors, and I'm sure Nick is going to mention this later, because of the capacitors and even tubes in some cases and those things, even regardless of when or how much it's used, those TVs just make weird noises. So that was one of the first things I thought. It was a TV. I'm like, I wonder if it was just an old TV in general that they're just going to make noises just by being plugged in,
Yeah.
But if it's a flat screen, those shouldn't make noises. They really shouldn't.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just weird because it was off.
Right. Like, I'm used to a TV making a sound being turned on, and then even afterwards, like for the next few minutes, making a sound or something, but it was consistently throughout the night, even when we weren't.
I suppose there could have been like some sort of power surges, maybe some old wiring that, kind of.
Definitely possible old wiring in that hotel.
Yeah.
And then the transition to an alarm malfunctioning directly after that. Yeah, it was pretty odd.
Yeah, and I really like your idea of moving your phone off of the clock, because like we know that because of just how electromagnetic fields are, if it's an old clock that has a quartz mechanism in it, you putting your cell phone on top of it can make it do weird things, like just in general. The fact that it was even because even after you moved your phone, it still did some weird things too, correct?
I mean, I think by the time I moved my phone, the buzzing had stopped. And we were trying, like, you could probably hear it in the EVP, like, we're trying to figure out why it was doing that. And I was like, oh, well, my phone was on it. Maybe that did something to it.
I think that's the funniest part, is as we were troubleshooting and talking ourselves down from it is when you hear the voice in the EVP.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I agree. And I love the fact that in this EVP, you guys are actively troubleshooting exactly what you're talking about. So it's like it's not like in some of the TV shows and other things that we've all seen where like people are immediately buying everything that's happening to them around. Like I think that goes to show. So I just think that's evidence to your guys' credibility, like trying to come at this from like a balanced standpoint, you know. And I think that's apparent in the file I'm going to play. So for our listeners, what you're going to hear now is first you're going to hear the unabridged EVP sound file. I'm going to play that twice, just the full thing twice. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the isolated EVP 3 times. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play what I cleaned up 3 more times. So hopefully that'll give you guys a good idea of what we're talking about. And I think you guys are going to be surprised at even the first run through. So here we go. Here is the Gettysburg EVP.
What was that? I'm done. No more. I'm seriously done. What is that?
Oh, probably it's because I have all this on top.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure I've had it happen to me before, actually. No.
What was that? I'm done. No more. I'm seriously done. What is that?
Oh, probably it's because I have all this on top.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure I've had it happen to me before, actually.
Okay, so we're back with Edgar and now Sarah talking about the EVP you guys just listened to. Tell me about your guys' first impressions.
First impressions of like what it said, or just
like you heard it the first time. What happened?
Oh, the first time.
Yeah, we were freaked out because we listened to it there. No, we didn't. We listened to that when we got home. Yeah.
You were cooking dinner. I was sitting on the couch going through recordings. I remember this very vividly.
Yeah, okay.
Going through,
Yep.
expecting nothing. And when I got to that part, I ripped the headphones out of my ears and my whole body got chills because that is never the thing that I expected to hear. Yeah. And I made you stop everything you were doing and come over and listen. We listened to it like 30 times.
And it was crazy to think about because like of how loud that voice was.
Yeah.
Like the microphone was literally like a foot and a half from me. So like who, whatever was there talking was really close to me. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. And I love the fact that you could hear where you're at, Edgar. You can hear where you're at in relation to the microphone, and you can hear where Sarah's at. And from like a just sound engineer standpoint, what that does is it creates a profile for like the timbre of the voice. That voice had to either be very close to the mic or literally imprinted itself digitally, because it sounds nothing like either of your voices. And with how clear it is, it completely rules out the fact that it could have been coming from like another room or something like that. And because it was being recorded off of your iPad, it's not like it could have been picking up something from like the clock radio or like a phone playing a clip or something like that. I think it immediately, just by how you guys were in the room, it rules out all those other possibilities, I think.
Yeah.
So I know what I think it said. What do you guys think it said?
All right. Like I said, Sarah and I have different opinions on what we think. What I think it says is, I saved his heart with an accent to it. That was my thought. I can't get away from it.
I hear his heart also, but I can't make out the first word. To me, it sounds like it starts with an F. So I'm still not sure what it says, but I hear an F in the first word. So
I'm so excited right now. So like I am. So there's two parts of this. Like, and for those of you at home listening to this, like you can't see me gyrating because I'm so excited about this right now. So I am like 110% positive that the last word is heart. I completely agree with Edgar, and I am also 120% sure that that's an Irish accent that we're hearing.
yeah, that's what I hear. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And so the fact that you said accent really, I think what it says is a vicious heart.
Okay.
That's what I hear, a vicious heart. What you're saying is I saved his heart from a linguistic standpoint makes more sense. You know, that's probably a more common phrase than a vicious heart, given the animosity and everything like that in the area. Like, who knows? So I don't think any of those. And Sarah, you said you're not sure about the beginning, but heart is definitely the last word.
Yeah, I feel like I hear the word feared, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
So
Yeah, like I think it's definitely like 2.5 to 3 syllables, then heart.
Yeah.
For sure. Now, whenever I send this to the other guys, I'm going to cut this part of the interview out, so they don't hear us talking about it, because I also want to hear what they think completely unencumbered. So I think that's going to be interesting for the listeners, for you guys to get what they think.
Oh yeah.
Like again, the accent is so prevalent on heart.
It is.
It just really blows my mind. And obviously, I mean, let's say hypothetically that it's not Irish, but it's just some other accent. I'm going to be curious to see what Nick thinks, because he's kind of like the resident linguist and would have a better idea of maybe how that accent could be placed from that time period. But it's so interesting you guys both think that. That's so...
Yeah. I was going to say, so yeah, it's kind of like a whispering. So, I mean, it could kind of throw off whatever accent we're perceiving. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, and you know, after we listened to it like 5 million times, I tried to see if I could explain it away somehow. Like maybe, you know, as I was moving my phones around, like it, you know, corner of my phone like slid on the table and made like a
or if you touch the microphone with your hand, because we did a bunch of things, recorded different things to see what it sounded like, and none of it sounded the same.
It's just so clear to us that it's a voice saying something. So you know, we tried at least.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I was blown away the first time I heard it, because it is so, like, even on like major TV shows and podcasts, when they talk about catching like a good EVP, there's times where they'll play it and they play the same clip like 3 times in a row, and I'm like, I don't hear a damn thing. I don't hear anything. And one thing that we forgot to point out with this, I think our listeners need to know, is what you're hearing is a recording of the original recording, to be specific. So the original recording would have been even clearer.
It was a lot clearer.
It's just, it's such like to me, it's a really compelling piece of evidence. And again, we can kind of go back and forth on who this, because it was, again, to me, it sounds like a feminine voice too. Is that what you guys? Is that kind of how you guys?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like we could speculate for ages on who this woman was and why she's there, whether this is a intelligent force or entity, or whether it's just residual and kind of playing back, you know, in the area. And it's one of those things where even though you guys had those things happen beforehand that kind of like prompted you, because this is like a statement, like I almost get the impression that like she was doing those things to specifically be heard, you know?
Yeah.
That's a completely just empathetic kind of thing that I'm getting off of it. But
no, I mean, I tend to agree with that. So.
Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts or theories or even just like musings on like where it could have came from, who it could have been, anything like that?
I mean, it's again, you know, it sounds like a woman's voice, and the fact that like, because running off of what I thought it said, you know, I saved his heart. Maybe she one of the soldiers or someone involved there, she's talking about her lover, her husband, or something like that lost, or I don't know.
I think at one point after it, I went down a deep spiral of trying to research if there were any women that died during that time in that area. And I mean, obviously I didn't get very far, but it was, I went down a rabbit hole for trying to figure out if there's actually a related to that area that would have been significant.
And that's kind of why earlier I asked you about any other things that the receptionist mentioned, because it would have been interesting to know if she would have been like, oh, we do have a resident female spirit, or something like that. So
I also wish we would have heard it then, so we could have asked, because the fact that we didn't hear it until we got home, and now that hotel doesn't even exist anymore, it's not like we can go back and be like, hey, tell us more about this.
How did this affect you guys, like going forward, whenever it comes to like either your want to look into ghost hunting more, or just how you approach these things? How did it affect you guys?
I mean, we went back to Gettysburg for a couple years after that. And we stayed in a couple different notable haunted locations, and any chance we get, if we're ever in like a historic area or out that way, we'll try to stay in somewhere where I can bust out an EVP session or do a little bit of ghost hunting. It does intrigue me. I mean, honestly, since then we've had no real experiences. Maybe a little shuffling.
I think we had one on that trip other than that, but honestly, before that trip, I've always loved ghost stories and ghost hunting things, and I was fascinated by it, but I'd never had an experience myself. So as much as I wanted to believe in it, I was never 100%.
Same.
So when I heard that, it really took me to another level with it.
So either way, I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk to us about this.
Yeah,
awesome. Thank you.
So everyone, that was my interview with Edgar and Sarah, who had a pretty crazy experience and a really wild piece of evidence from a trip to Gettysburg. First off, I want to thank them again for taking the time out of their day to tell us the story. Now that it's out there, what do you guys think about it?
Well, I'm going to start by saying very quickly that in August of 1996, I also stayed at that hotel. And the only thing preternatural that I experienced at that time was some just disturbingly wonderful blueberry pancakes the morning after. I was there with my grandparents. It was really more of a motel because you entered your room from the outside. I was almost more shocked to learn that it is no longer there, and you just told me that it is now a brewery. So
the Appalachian Brewing Company, which is fantastic. It's really good. Anybody who gets a chance to stop there, highly recommend it.
It is gonna have to really step up a bit to supplant those blueberry pancakes in my mind, though. But of course, I don't know. That's been some years. I will say I was happy to hear you ask about. I heard you say capacitors and say, well, Nick will probably say something. For anybody, it's a lot of times on the old cathode tube televisions that so many of us grew up with, and even on radios and amplifiers, especially those that have tremolo built in. If you are a guitar bass person, when you turn it off, it'll fade away, and that is most often the filter capacitors training to ground. And when you get inside of radio repair, television repair back in the day was, even for vacuum tube people, was a highly specialized thing, much like doing carburetors or transmission is for automotive people. Those filter capacitors theoretically can hold pretty lethal, but certainly they can hold charges for a long time if they're not properly grounded. And of course, you'll be thinking, well, why wouldn't they properly ground it? But you can get cold joints, things can change over time, and so it is really important to drain those. But sometimes, if the capacitors themselves are very large, you can watch them fade out. You can hear them fade out, but that's what's going on. But also, you mentioned about the placement of the phone perhaps being interacting with things, and we've talked about. I of course have my basement radio example that would have interference from the neighbor's garage door openers. And I think I said one time before, I had borrowed a car that, and I was transporting a television. The television was in the trunk, but something was going on. It would make the radio scan, or if I had a CD player in, it would periodically make it jump ahead. And it was self-evidently coming from the television. It was a really curious thing. I am not super familiar with what makes that sort of thing happen, but it was, we could very quickly isolate that problem and whatnot. As far as the EVP itself, I, honest to goodness, didn't hear anything at first. It definitely sounds like a breathy thing, but I think it could be something that could be replicated in other ways. There's no getting around it, though. It does sound like a breathy human voice, but I don't think that's all that it could be. I did think that was interesting that you all three did come up with that same word. When I hear it, if I'm trying to think of a word, the first thing I hear is swart or sort. But I don't know. I'll let you go on for a minute, Mike.
Okay, so the first thing I want to do is ask about this hotel. They said it's just a normal hotel. Is it in Gettysburg? Like, I've never been to Gettysburg before.
It's in Gettysburg. It was a motel. Like Nick said, you entered from the outside, so it was a motel. Technically. Not
it's a little outside of town proper. If I remember correctly, because it's right next door, literally right next door to where Lee was kind of like his headquarters.
Yeah. Okay. And it's on its way like out of town towards where the old visitor center was. So still on like the battlefield.
So I've never been to Gettysburg, but basically the impression I get, it's a town, and then there is the battlefield is within the town, or is it close by?
Parts of the battlefield coincide with the town, but essentially the battlefield surrounds the town.
There was fighting in town too, as well.
Yes. And in fact, and real quick, and I don't mean to get off track with you there, Mike. I know Sarah said that in the interview that she was looking for women that had died, and there was one civilian casualty, and that was a woman right outside of another hotel and by one of the good pizza places in town, coincidentally. That's the only one I'm familiar with female-wise. Sorry, Mike.
Yep.
No, that's all good information that I was hoping to get. I have an older flat screen TV that also pops for a few minutes after you turn it off. But if I were to look at it from a less skeptical standpoint, any type of spirit could be finding a way to manipulate energy through the capacitors, through the components in the television. A capacitor would be a good point because, it essentially is storing energy, albeit temporarily. But if it's an older one, it might not be draining completely.
Well, and they do have a shelf life.
Like whenever they tell the story, it's not just the TV making the noises. It's the TV making the noises, Sarah having a weird feeling about the place the whole time, the fact that they were previously trying to do EVP sessions, then had the interference on the radio, then, unbeknownst to them, captured said EVP.
You can hear Sarah being kind of, as she says, "I'm done."
Yeah.
You can hear she's kind of, and I don't know Edgar. I don't think I've ever met Edgar. You've spoken highly of him to me in the past, but I know Sarah. And that, you could hear it in her voice.
Yeah. So specifically with the EVP, I kind of want to go over a few things that I didn't mention to them at the time of the conversation. When it comes to like this EVP in general, I think that, we would classify this, I think we could all agree, as a, class B EVP, in the sense that it is not a disembodied voice because they didn't hear it at the time. So it's true EVP in that sense. There's definitely something there, but it's not 110% clear. Me, Edgar, and Sarah all had different interpretations of it, but landed on female voice, accent, and heart being the last word. Nick, obviously, like you said, you hear something there. You can hear some syllables, maybe, but as far as putting it together, I'm not quite sure. Would that be
I'm in
accurate?
agreement with everything you've said thus far, and I think, again, do I think it's a voice? I could see that sound being generated. I do think it's very interesting how, as you mentioned, it is very clearly a sound. We don't hear any other sounds like that. So is it one of them shifting on the carpet? I don't know, but there's definitely, was it heart? Was it sort? Was it swart?
Yeah.
There's definitely ending with a dental sound. That if we're going to interpret it as a consonant, it's ending on a hard dental sound.
Yeah. So kind of getting into real quick the idea of like what else it could be. Obviously, Edgar brought up the fact that he did have his phone on the clock radio, which made some weird noises, which I think we can all agree could have been some sort of electromagnetic interference with the clock radio. Again, not specifically paranormal, but adds into the weirdness of what was going on at the time. Now, I think some of the things that do inform the quality of this EVP, like you said, is you could hear Sarah and you can hear Edgar. Given where both those two voices sound, would you guys all agree that what we hear on the EVP is not their voices?
Agreed.
So the kind of the really strange thing that is going to get a little technical and a little nerdy, but I feel like you guys will appreciate it, is so whenever I was cleaning up this EVP and isolating it, you guys heard the last three that were played were like the isolated, cleaned up version. So while cleaning that up, one of the things I obviously do is run a general EQ balance on it to try and see where the waveform is at. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, the human hearing is generally between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. The human voice exists along that spectrum. The bulk of it being in the low hundreds and ending usually around 4,000 to 5,000. That's where the vast majority of the human voice is. Now, whenever I look at this EVP in an equalization standpoint, and I'm not sure if this makes it more likely that it's paranormal or less likely. That's why I want your guys' opinion on it. When looking at it, it does not look like a human voice. There are two distinct peaks during the EVP, one around 800 and one around 1400, which isn't quite an octave, but close. And there are three distinct troughs around those two high points, which is not typical of a human voice. So being someone who has a background in audio engineering, if you just gave me how that EQ looks and said, hey, what is this? I would say it is not a human voice. So what I think that rules out is that it's not someone speaking from another room. It's not radio interference, because even a human voice coming through a radio would still look like a human voice on that spectrum.
You know, like sometimes when there's a lot of modulation on radio, would that alter where it would sit on?
No, because that's an excellent question. What the modulation would then do is it would create either more or less octaves depending on the type of modulation. Because it would, like, let's say there were peaks in a human voice, well, let's say look at a human voice that was heavily modulated, you would see peaks and troughs at those different octave ranges, starting or ending at any one point. So again, like looking at it in that sense from a very objective audio standpoint, I would say that what we're hearing there is not at least spoken human voice in any sense. And like I said, that was something that I didn't know about until after I had the conversation with Edgar and Sarah. What do you guys kind of think about that?
First of all, when I heard the EVP, I actually shut the recording off and I didn't listen again for a day. And I was just trying to process in my head what it could be saying. And ultimately, I didn't really come up with anything. I mean, you can definitely I feel like you can hear an M sound and an R sound.
Okay, interesting.
And with what you and Edgar had come up with you guys said heart, right?
Yeah, the last word we all three of us were under the impression that the last word was heart. It was a female voice and had an accent.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I had not heard heart.
Mm-hmm.
And after hearing it, I go back and I listen, and I can hear heart because. And this is something I was kind of thinking about with paranormal shows. You'll see them say something, and then everyone's like, "Oh yeah, it says that," and that's why I was trying not to.
Or they put subtitles in, and then it's really obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can understand like what you guys are saying about the possibility that it's something else.
Mm-hmm.
My only issue with that is that there's no. I mean, you feel like you would have heard that at some other point. And it's not nothing that's being repeated,
mm-hmm.
and they like they said they hadn't heard it at the time. Which like if you had said it was the answering machine or something, maybe it could have been something they didn't notice,
mm-hmm.
or maybe something even brushing against the microphone. But there's a lot of variations in the sound. It's not just one syllable. It's multiple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, what I'm coming back around to is that everyone who's hearing these things is hearing different things.
Mm-hmm.
You, Sarah, and Edgar all heard something different. I heard something different.
Mm-hmm.
I'd asked my wife, and she had heard something completely different from what I was hearing.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
If you're looking at the way it's coming across on the
mm-hmm.
recording in
mm-hmm.
comparison to a human voice,
mm-hmm.
if whatever it is trying to speak, it's not really going to ever sound like a human.
Yeah, like I'm not an EVP expert by any stretch, so I don't know. Like there probably are people out there who have analyzed lots of EVPs and might know more about like if that's typical. Like I don't know if that's typical or atypical.
Right.
I'm not sure if most EVPs look like a human voice or maybe most EVPs don't look like a human voice. I'm honestly not sure. Like I said, I'm not sure, so I don't know if that lends credibility to it or not.
Right. I feel like it's definitely a voice saying something, but like I'm obviously much less skeptical than Nick or
Grumpy over here.
than Grumpy. Yeah.
Well, like what do you guys think about the because we've talked before about like perception and the idea of kind of being primed for certain things. And Edgar and Sarah like fully admit they're into ghosts and they were doing EVP sessions. So like
okay, but in that scenario, even if they are freaked out at that time, mm-hmm. Sarah went back later on when they weren't even in the hotel anymore.
Yeah,
and was listening to it, so it's kind of disjointed there. It's not really they're primed at that point. I wouldn't think so. She might have,
I would agree.
She was definitely freaked out whenever it was happening, and then you can hear Edgar trying to like be like, "Oh, I think it was this."
Yeah.
I'll say something inclusive though.
Yeah.
When you do listen to it, there's no getting around the fact that it is spooky sounding.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to deny that. Sitting up late at night listening to that, it's not comforting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I could imagine a myriad of possible things that it could be, without extensive trial and error. Could it have been just like something falling off the bed, like a sheet of paper, like those little guides? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. And you would not think, hey, wasn't that time that brochure fell off the bed? That would never occur to you.
Yeah.
So
no,
it is definitely unsettling sounding. That's for sure. And when you listen to it, it does sound like a woman whispering something. I'm not going to deny that for anything.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear what other people think about this because they've been sitting on this for years, and we're the first kind of like podcast to publish it. So I'm really curious to hear what other folks hear in this, whether it's similar or whether it's something completely different, like you were saying with your wife. And I think that's kind of the fun part is again, it's definitely creepy sounding. It's one of those things where I think it either A, has a completely mundane explanation that as vigilant as both Edgar and Sarah were for like trying to debunk stuff at the time, like just like Nick said, it could have been something completely mundane like that. That's option A. Option B is that a spirit imprinted itself onto his iPad. You know,
well, you said in the interview it's evidence. It's evidence, but I would say it's evidence for what? It might be evidence of something, but can we even draw the conclusion that it's a spiritual thing?
Yeah, and that's exactly, and that's the interesting thing is that like it would just like the Ghostlight story with Jesse and Ange. This is not what you would expect in like a Gettysburg EVP. You'd expect like someone in pain or gunfire, cannon fire, like who knows? It's not like what you'd expect out of that area, you know? I'm not sure what that factor does to it, but I think it's definitely an interesting factor. It's like going to a graveyard and seeing a Bigfoot, you know, kind of thing. It's like, I kind of expect a ghost, but, you know, there's this thing, you know?
Sometimes you just take what you can get.
Exactly.
It does make me think it's like the celebrity thing. A celebrity was here once and now they haunt the place eternally. And yeah, there's the things we expect to see spooky in Gettysburg would of course be related to this historic battle that kind of shadows everything there. But there are normal people that live in Gettysburg that have hugely traumatic things happen to them. And so if we say trauma and such is one of these reasons for these things, then why not something banal?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Brendan was talking about what people think, and if anyone has any opinions on that, then they can email us at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com, and we would love to hear it.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm really curious to hear what other people think.
At one point, I said that T sound, like I called it a dental sound. It's actually a passive alveolar stop that makes our hard T. It's our TH sounds, of which we have two that are a dental. And now I feel like an idiot.
I hope someone calls us on that. I hope that's like the first one. I hope the first 1-star review we get is someone like, these guys have no idea what they're talking about.
That is a voiceless passive alveolar sound. Yeah, and they're gonna. It's gonna be the downfall of.
Right, that's where it all starts. Yeah.
It's a knife fight out there, as they say. So anyhow, speaking of people emailing us, and of course. We have a story that was emailed to us that I'm going to read here. And as always, every story segment starts with Michael's impression of a flooded lawnmower engine. So, Mike, kick us off if you would.
Next time I will have that ready.
You're tearing me apart. You're breaking my confidence daily.
You keep changing it on me.
This is a tradition as old as time. Okay.
So we have one tradition here, Mike.
All right. So I do want to say a small preamble before I start here is one, my chair is very squeaky. There is that. So ignore that. But also, I am familiar with this area, very familiar because of work. And I actually reached out to my father. And I'll explain why in a little bit, because he has worked out there as well with some of the pipeline stuff. He's a hydrogeologist. But this comes to us from John B. And the moment I say the name of this road, you are going to realize why it is I remember this. Yes, Mike.
That was John B.
John B. Okay. John in Butler, we'll say. That's how he said to refer to him. So John in Butler sent this to us way back at the very end of January. So here's John's story. I'm living near Butler, Pennsylvania now, but growing up in the country near Johnstown, Pennsylvania, my grandmother told me a story about a headless horseman. The horseman's name was John Brown, supposedly an innkeeper in a small town called Armagh. The inn was called the Black Lantern, Anyway, story goes that Brown would steal horses, money, jewelry, and whatever treasures his patrons would have after they went to bed, and ride to a nearby cavern and hide the horses and the treasures there. There is a road named after it, Horse Thief Hollow Road. Eventually, he was caught and beheaded for his crime, so one night, myself and my 2 cousins were camping in the area when we heard dogs barking like crazy. Then, being younger and scared and worried, I assured them not to worry. It was just some dogs from the house down the road. Just as I said that, we all heard what sounded like wagon wheels and horse hooves on the gravelly dirt road. We quickly grabbed all of our things and took off out of there. Now, being an amateur ghost hunter myself, I regret leaving. One day I plan on returning with my equipment and seeing what I can find. So that comes to us from John in Butler County. And I want to add I'll let you 2 respond first, but I do have some things I dug up by going through the history.
Oh, cool. I guess just my 2 cents. Like, one, like that story has it all. So that's a really wild story. I've never heard that one before. I think that whenever you're out there and you hear like dogs barking, like anytime you're like on edge, you hear a bunch of dogs barking. That's like a universal sign of like something's up. You know, maybe it's just a possum, or maybe it's a headless ghost. You know, like it's a big
spectrum.
It's a big spectrum, but there's something. Like you're on the line somewhere. And I can just imagine here when he says like you hear like the wagon wheels on like the dirt road and everything. Like that's a very specific sound. And I imagine hearing that in the dead of night is, even if you don't know the story, I can see that being really unnerving. Knowing the story, I completely understood why him and his companions just split. Because yeah, you're right. Like as an amateur ghost hunter, you're like, oh man, like this is my chance to really interact with like the other on like a grand scale. But I think that's a very Monday morning quarterback thing that we'd all like to say. But at the time, completely understand where he's coming from. That's a really cool story. Again, it has it all, and I'm curious to hear some of the background. But what do you think, Mike?
Well, first of all, Nick, when you started talking about this and you said the guy's name was John B., and then you went on to say the horse thief was named John Brown, I drew a connection there. But so I went on and looked at the emails, and the guy's that name is actually Jason. So I think we should clarify that for his sake.
Oh, sorry, Jason Butler. I had started archiving all the stories, and for whatever reason, I'm looking at it now. I put John B as part of because I have a category. Got very Dewey Decimal over here. It's like a card catalog system because I'm a dinosaur. Yes, sorry. That came to us from Jason and Butler.
Jason B.
Probably catatonic.
Yeah.
I thought Mike was going to say that the ghost was actually the one emailing us.
At first, that's what I thought.
And
so I had to verify
boy.
this. That would be quite a twist, huh?
Talking about burying the lead, you know. I mean, but sorry, Mike, continue.
No, I think it's a fun story. I wish they would have stuck around and seen what that was.
And we might not have gotten the story then, though, Mike.
That's a good point.
About safety first.
For Jason's sake, I'm glad he got out of there when he did.
For Jason and Jonathan, really.
Yeah, right.
I mean, camping in the woods, we've talked about being primed for things, and that's certainly something right there. Mm-hmm. At least for me, anytime I'm out in the woods, I love being in the woods. I love camping at my, in the cabin in the woods, but I'm always terrified at night. It's just because you're looking out.
It can get weird quick, and again, like that's why again, I completely understand like him and them leaving because you're camping in the woods. It's already kind of creepy. There may or may not be a headless robber around. Right. You hear dogs barking, and then you hear wagon wheels, and like unless it's a folk band, I'm out of there.
Nick, being familiar with Johnstown, is there Amish people in that area?
There are some. It's not a lot. And again, this is closer to Armagh. In fact, let me tell you, are either of you familiar with Buttermilk Falls?
No.
Yes.
This Buttermilk Falls is a really nice little park, natural setting, and of course, there's the waterfalls there. If you haven't, as I have heard rumor, Mike, that you have not been there, I would recommend it. It is worth the time. And this is actually a stone's throw. So Horse Thief Road, like I said, I am familiar with it. Route 22 passes just north of it. So, yeah, there are some Amish, but I wouldn't say they're especially plentiful.
I mean, that's the only like realistic thing you could think, that if you're hearing wagon wheels, I know if you were up north from here, you could hear the similar types of things in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I agree. I do think that is totally reasonable. But let me tell you what I found out. So when I read that he was beheaded for his crimes, I said, that's nonsense. I mean, we don't have a long storied history of beheadings here in Pennsylvania, the Quaker state, you know. We have had hangings, and we have had other sorts of things, but yeah, not so much beheadings. That said, there does seem to be some evidence for this John Brown. Unfortunately, John Brown is just a wicked common name. So as I'm going through the newspapers in the area, I'm seeing a lot about John Brown, you know, the abolitionist who started an insurrection. Here's what I can say, though. Route 22 is built upon the remnants of the old Huntington, Cambria, and Indiana Turnpike. And there was a person named John Brown who more recent writings say was named John Yank Brown because he came from somewhere in New England. Now, I can't confirm that. It seems like a lot of the local lore around Indiana and Cambria County suggests that he ran an inn, much as was stated in the story we received from Jason. Now, the current folklore suggests that it was something like the Bloody Benders. For those of you not familiar, there was a maybe family of serial killers in eastern Kansas in the 1870s who ran an inn. It would famously murder people who came through. A lot of the suggestion around John Brown is a very similar story. Now, I don't believe that, but what I can confirm is I went through a bunch of contemporary newspapers. The Ebensburg Mountain Sentinel. Ebensburg is the county seat of Cambria County, Pennsylvania, although Cambria County, Pennsylvania is largely overshadowed by Johnstown, where the dam disaster was that a lot of people are somewhat familiar with. The Ebensburg Mountain Sentinel, I found January 17th, 1850, a John Brown of Wheatfield Township, which is the area we are specifically speaking about, was found not guilty of counterfeiting bills, which is in line with some of the early stories. And then again, in the same newspaper, the Ebensburg Mountain Sentinel, the following month, he is in there as well for debts owed, it seems, to the Huntington, Cambria, and Indiana Turnpike. So pretty interesting. In the 1853, we see he is in trouble for stealing horses in the newspaper, and he would eventually be sent to the Western Penitentiary. Now, this is better known as the State Correctional Institute in Pittsburgh. I have tried to do some digging into seeing if there's any records, but there doesn't appear to be any. The last thing I see, which suggests that this person was rather infamous in the area, actually comes as late as June 3rd, 1916, where Indiana County, Pennsylvania had the Patriot newspaper. So again, June of 1916, there is an article that talks about they are drilling for gas and oil on the property that abuts the old, quote, John Brown tract. Now, we can presume John Brown was quite likely deceased by this point, or at least at the youngest, he's in his 70s. So do I believe that he ran an inn where he murdered people? Probably not, but there seems to be plenty of evidence that he was certainly a horse thief and at least have been charged, if not convicted, of counterfeiting. So pretty interesting. I had reached out to my father because the rumors and the lore continues that the money that he stole, he had stowed away in a nearby cave known as Nugent Cave. or Nugent Cave. I'm not certain on the pronunciation. Having said that, I couldn't find any research, or in my research, I couldn't find any supporting evidence for this cave. However, I spoke to my father briefly, who again is a geologist and works in that region for some pipelines, and he is familiar with some cave systems in that immediate area. In fact, there is a compression station, a natural gas compression station, not far from Horse Thief Hollow Road, he says. Supposedly, a lot of people after John Brown, super common name, died, were investigating, trying to find that, were digging around, poking around in that cave, which caused some collapse of that cave, or so the story goes. As far as the Black Lantern Inn, I can't find any contemporary evidence of it existing.
My kind of gut reaction to a lot of this is it sounds like a lot of old folk tales that we hear from a lot of different areas, where I think it's probably more likely that the current iteration that Jason told us is probably been passed down for generations and is more than likely an amalgamation of multiple stories rather than just of one person. Especially, like you said, this guy sounds like he was pretty infamous in the area. So odds are anything crazy that happened was probably attributed to him. You know?
Yeah, and I do believe that the name Horse Thief Hollow Road could very well likely be named after him.
Yeah, that would make complete sense. Absolutely. And again, when you talk about these kind of folk tales, these folk ghost stories, typically when you dig, you find that it's not exactly how it's told contemporarily, but there's enough grains of truth to it that keep it alive and make it palpable for us to keep telling. And again, that's why I think that knowing that story and being out there at night near that spot and everything, man, if I heard wagon wheels, I'd be like, I can't emphasize enough how quickly I would be leaving. because like you just don't know if it's some vengeful spirit. You know, it's like, oh man, this guy, you know, is headless. And he's like, no, I'm not headless, but also a bad dude. You know, I think part of it's just splitting hairs at some point.
I will say that, and I can't believe I didn't mention this, I did see in one of those papers I was scouring, there was, in the same one that mentioned John Brown owing some debts, there was mention of a body being found on the Huntington-Cambria, Indiana Turnpike. It doesn't link, and the horse had trotted off just a few hundred yards from where the body was found, but there's that. So there you are.
Do you think it's possible at all some of this story might have been embellished specifically for the purpose of keeping people away from the area so that those in the know could look for the hidden treasure?
Sure, why not?
You know, and if I was someone who was a treasure hunter and I was looking in that area, you would be sorely mistaken if you wouldn't think that I would be riding around in a wagon. Jason said he heard, you know, wagon wheels and everything. Coming back to that, like we said, outside of a horse and buggy, modern horse and buggy, that's a pretty distinctive sound that he heard.
Right.
And, you know, when we talk about, you know, residual hauntings of things just playing over and over, it might not even have been John Brown. It might have just been some other ghost carriage. We don't know. But I think that's a very interesting story that has its roots in some really rich folklore.
It does make me wonder about some other street names I've seen, because there have been some that really stick in my mind. I know in northern Pennsylvania, over by Endeavor, there's something like a bloodbath road, no joke. There's a dead horse road up near Marionville, Pennsylvania, which is in Forest County. And of course, in Ohio, this is either in the Akron Canton or the Columbus area, there is a Fangboner Road, which definitely makes me wonder what sort of sordid history lies behind its name.